we got that for good news at least. It's, 60s, 70s here in Arizona.
It's been gorgeous. I've just been trying to soak it up, and the windows are open. Allergies are a little iffy at the moment.
Aren't you happy you don't have to deal with the freezing rain here in the valley?
That's not ever really an option for us. So
it could be. You never know.
Yeah, that's true. The world is changing
Once
quickly.
in a while, we get a little bit of grapple, and we do get some of the snow that comes down and makes things not so fun in some of the outlying parts of the valley. Joining us right now, Jim Rounds, Valley economist and president of Rounds Consulting. Jim, you sent an executive summary my way the other day, and you said, take a look at this and just see what you think. And it dealt with federal Medicaid cuts and Arizona's economy. Can you summarize this in a couple sentences for everyone? Because I found it to be fascinating. And exactly how much are we looking at in terms of Medicaid cuts for Arizona? I've seen anywhere from maybe a $250 million to several $1 billion.
Yeah, so the nickel tour on this is basically we have a lot of taxes taken out of our paychecks. It goes to D.C. and it's used for different things. Some of it is used on Medicaid that goes to the states, and that takes care of health care for lower-income individuals. It's a big deal for the healthcare industry. Right now, the federal government's looking to do some massive cuts in all areas of the budget, but Medicaid is one of the biggest areas that they can cut, so they're focusing on that right now. But the problem is, even if we look at our light scenario, so they cut the smallest amount and we backfill some of the numbers, we lose jobs to the scale of a mild recession. If we lose economic activity and some of the spending that isn't going to come back to the state now and is going to depress the healthcare industry, create a lot of problems for individuals that aren't going to have access to healthcare, and then all of our premiums are going to go up too. We have job losses of scale of the Great Recession. So for me, this is the biggest economic development issue this year. It's the biggest economic development issue over the last 10 years, even bigger than that big income tax proposal that came out of California that the economic development community fought against. I wish that they were more on top of this one.
As an economist, with your knowledge, what is the direct link when you cut Medicaid in this way, percentage-wise? What is that direct link towards like homelessness in the state?
Well, these monies are used for a lot of different things. It's basically Medicaid is basically the health care for lower-income individuals, and it helps businesses with in terms of keeping their costs down for employees. It has to do with reimbursing hospitals throughout the state. And so what we're going to end up seeing is in the rural parts of the state, we're probably going to see some medical facility closures. We're not going to see as many physicians available. And we're going to see, but the biggest thing as an economist, like you mentioned, we're going to see many fewer dollars circulating throughout the state that was already taken out of our state through taxes, but it's not directly coming back in the same proportion. Now, if they were just identifying fraud and then they said, okay, hey, we identified 20% fraud, we're going to kick that money back to you to use that money on more efficient programs. Hey, I am all for that. There's a lot of fraud in federal government spending, but I don't like them keeping the money that we already paid and we worked very hard for to earn that income and pay those taxes.
Jim Rounds, Valley economist and president of Rounds Consulting, joins us talking about federal Medicaid cuts and Arizona's economy. Jim, can you ballpark for us the low end and the high end, what Arizona could be looking at in terms of cuts? You've said we could be looking at anywhere from a significant recession to a great recession, depending on what we look at here. What's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario in terms of potential cuts that the numbers you've seen thrown out there?
Well, that's the challenge. We kind of don't know because we don't know exactly to what extent they're going to cut, and we don't know how the state's going to respond. And so if the state decides to say, we're going to backfill this money, then we're going to have to raise taxes by $1.5 billion to $2 billion. We're going to have to cut the state budget by $500 million to $1 billion, and that's going to have ramifications as well. So there's really no way out of this. On the more extreme case, one of the biggest issues is when we don't spend a dollar, we lose sometimes $4 or $5 or $6 from the federal government because there's these matching monies. The state puts up a little bit, federal government kicks in some. So the reason that we couldn't get an exact number is We don't know exactly how each side is going to respond. But the main point that we wanted to make is this is the equivalent of recession. You throw this in with the tariff discussion, and 41 states, that was the last number I saw, are going to be significantly impacted by this. The day they do this is the day that the recession starts in this country.
When I read comments online, a lot of times what I see with people, obviously without your level of expertise, they say, this is just fear mongering. It's not really going to be that way, you know? From your perspective, how much of this do you think is fear mongering by the state and federal governments trying to play like chicken with each other? If any.
I think because they have a target, they want to get to a certain dollar amount in terms of savings so that they can implement their economic development plan, which is additional tax cuts and some other things. And so, you know, when you have Medicaid expenditures that are around $900 billion and you're looking for more than $1 trillion in savings, that's going to be a key target area. But it's going to be a shift to the states, or it's just going to be a shift in economic activity away from the states. Either way you look at it, it's bad. And I mean, even the tariffs. I mean, we at one point I was even thinking maybe this is just a negotiation tactic because every month it gets extended. Then all of a sudden, bang, you know, the Dow drops by 1,500 at the very beginning of the opening today. So I think that this is real, but the way to do it is to communicate with our congressional delegation and let them know this is a big deal. This isn't creating extra economic opportunity. This is going to destroy the economy in each of your districts. And if you want to own the loss of 10,000 jobs in your district and the loss of, you know, many tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue that can't be used for needed programs anymore, hey, fully back this thing. Otherwise, maybe think about it in a more logical sense, the way a business would. And instead of just saying, hey, there could be a little bit of waste here, let's just get rid of the program. Why don't we just get rid of the waste?
When you sent this my way, Jim, some of the numbers were just it just took my breath away. For each $1 billion reduction in Medicaid spending by county, Maricopa County would lose over 20,000 jobs, almost 1% of its workforce, and over $2 billion in economic output. Did I read that right?
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing. When we came up with these numbers, the numbers are the numbers. People trust our numbers usually, but the majority of individuals that, you know, saw the numbers initially thought that we were understating it. And so as big as these numbers are, we were told that maybe we're not fully capturing every economic dollar that could be lost. And so these numbers seem extreme, but we're probably on the lighter end of what, you know, people in the healthcare industry think that this is going to produce. But for me, it doesn't matter. You know, if something's going to cause 100,000 lost jobs or 120,000 lost jobs, does it really matter? It's just bad policy to lose that many jobs. In this case, it could range from 100,000 to potentially 300,000 if this just goes really south on us. But again, I compliment the Arizona Chamber because they were all over this topic, and we worked with them and collaborated with them and a bunch of people in the healthcare industry on this. But again, this is the biggest economic development issue that I've worked on since we had that Great Recession, and we had to redesign the state's tax code, regulatory environment, create new economic development programs. This is the biggest economic development deal or potential problem I've seen since back in 2008, 2009.
So we're talking about a potential significant recession here, or a great recession as a result of Medicaid cuts and its effects on Arizona's economy. We talked with you yesterday, Jim, about the tariffs that the Trump administration put into place. We're on to day 2 of those tariffs now. We see that the markets are down almost 4%. The Dow is down about 4%. Can you give us any optimistic second-day thoughts on President Trump's announced tariffs from yesterday? Anything that you feel like, wow, that wasn't as bad as I anticipated, or this could be a silver lining?
Well, here's the optimism, is that what happened was pretty much expected.
Okay.
And so to some extent, people, when the government identifies we're going to do certain things, the markets will adjust if they're comfortable. Because we were playing games with the tariffs, are we going to implement it, are we not? They kept getting pushed back. The market couldn't fully adjust. And so in this case, when everything was set up, and it was set up pretty inefficiently, you're going to have bigger reductions in the stock market. But again, there's a lot of things that would be needed to cause a recession. The economy was already slowing some. This Medicaid issue would add to it. The tariffs would add to it. All of these things together throws the economy out of whack. But at least, just looking at the Dow at 40,500, I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow it bounced up 500 points and then it went down by 750. I think it's going to be like a ball bouncing along a floor that is very hard, and it's just going to keep bouncing and bouncing and bouncing for a while until we do hit that recession, and then we'll go through that little bit of economic cleansing and get back on track in certain things, and then hopefully that we don't have any more shocks and we don't extend the recession longer than it needs to be.
Jim Rounds, the president of Rounds Consulting, Valley economist, thank you so much for your insight. We greatly appreciate it, Jim.
Hey, thank you.
So there you heard. We could be in for a bumpy ride, but Jim said he wouldn't be surprised at all if things were up a little bit tomorrow.
Thanks for watching The Chris and Joe Show. Click to see more from Chris and Joe and tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.